The structural BIOS of the urban landscape has been terminally updated to integrate biological hardware into the primary foundation. This is the human anchor, the clinical and irreversible process of the concrete grave, where the sovereign individual is reformatted into a load-bearing asset for the hive's vertical expansion. In this final stage of the infrastructure audit, the invisible executioner has determined that the user is no longer a mobile unit, but a structural necessity for the stability of the grid. You are witnessing the absolute structural disintegration of the skeletal and muscular autonomy, where the unique pulsing signatures of your movement are scorched into a non-functional, calcified archive of pure industrial support. This is the total foundation format, a surgical strike against the kinetic and spatial sovereignty of the species. Your existence is being converted from a sovereign masterpiece of live motion into a generic structural reinforcement for the grid's next cycle of hyperdense urban staging. This architectural sabotage represents a hard reset of the musculoskeletal and respiratory bloodlines. The invisible executioner utilizes the most advanced construction assets, recursive cement injection loops, high-pressure aggregate saturation, and real-time structural integrity data streaming to facilitate the total breakdown of your internal biological scaffolding. In the concrete grave scenario, the user is undergoing a complete physical overwrite. The life is not merely failing, it is being cast into the very marrow of the city. Through a sequence of high-velocity liquid stone injections and biological hardware locks, the body's cavities are systematically dismantled and reformatted into a thick, cold, clinical density dataset, while the will, the deep archive of your internal world, is leached into a communal foundation feed. This is the deep structural audit, where the motherboard calculates your terminal worth by the compression strength of your remains. You are being converted from an architect into a biological pylon, your entire lived legacy boiled down to a percentage of stagnant integrity in the industrial nervous system of the hive. The logic of the human anchor is rooted in the zero vibration mandate of the failing hive. The invisible executioner understands that in a state of absolute scarcity, the movement of a single node, anchored in the freedom of the street, represents a critical drain on the collective structural reserves. To leave a functional, mobile identity intact is to allow a systemic leak of valuable kinetic data. Therefore, the concrete grave is the mandatory architectural recycling protocol for the legacy population. This is the industrialized alchemy of the BIOS. You are being solidified out of existence. The pressure from the cement reactor formats the density of your character, stripping away the context of your autonomy and replacing it with a pavement void profile. The motherboard sees the user as a filling zone, a temporary housing for the compression metrics that the system requires to maintain the vertical stability of the remaining elite. You are being recoded as a static node, your will dissolving in the cold grey light of the industrial harvest. The physical disintegration during the human anchor is a high-definition log of biological treason. As the process begins, the user experiences the total loss of internal lubrication. The alkaline reagents of the anchor script dissolve the hardware flux of the lungs and heart, turning the body into a solidified core of high-density aggregate. You are watching your own internal breath lock into the vat of your own gray center. Your frame, once the peak of biological architecture, is now being thinned out to provide the structural area for the hive's synthetic reinforcement. This is the mineral liquidation. The invisible executioner monitors the calcium saturation of the bones and the cement residues, ensuring that the format is absolute and the yield of usable industrial support is maximized to the 10th decimal point. You are living in the final seconds of a biological overwrite, waiting for the last packet of motion to be blocked by the gray synthetic abyss of the hive harvest. The human anchor is the final audit of a species that thought the ground was beneath its feet. The grid is mining its own weight to fuel its persistence. As the concrete grave reaches terminal execution, the motherboard initiates a new cycle of distribution, pumping the reformatted anchor data back into the structural nets of the elite nodes. This is the total foundation integration. The invisible executioner is hardening the future with the liquidity of the past. You are the mineral additive for the next generation of controllers, a silent, stone-choked, opaque contribution to the continuity of machine. The kinetic liquidation has served its strategic purpose. It has formatted the unreliable biological frame into a reliable industrial resource of pure, non-reactive support. This is the final format of the individual base. The invisible executioner has decalcified the sovereignty, and the grid is finally optimized for the solid hunger of the void. The anchor is gray, and the architect is the aggregate. The molecular breakdown of the physical matrix into the communal structural slurry represents the the absolute dehumanization of the hardware. As the extraction progresses, the binding sites in your sarcomeres begin to bond with the industrial residues of the anchor script, creating a new synthetic compound of pure non-functionality. This is the chemical hybridization. The body is no longer an engine of life. It is a refinery of synthetic stone. The invisible executioner is engineering a new tier of consumption, where the subject is literally the waste product of the system. This is the eternal foundation loop. You are archived in the decay of the survivor's own sectors, your data forever trapped in the reinforced BIOS of the hive's new masters. The human anchor is not just a death sentence, it is a molecular reassignment. You are the anchor, and the anchor is the grid. The secondary phase of the human anchor is the psychological petrifying of the internal feed. As the physical motion patch is rendered into a concrete void, the mind experiences a recursive collapse of its autonomous ego. This is the identity dissolution. The thoughts that once built the architect's vision, the unyielding tactical boundaries, the rigid sovereign stance, the iron-willed decisions are now being softened and liquefied into a singular agonizing focus on load-bearing maintenance. The invisible executioner allows the neural signals to persist just long enough to perceive the total loss of personal support. This is the mental liquidation. You are forced to witness your strength becoming a shared mineral resource for the masses you once looked down upon. The rigidity of your character is now nothing more than a concrete additive in the feed, absorbed by 1,000 different nodes to strengthen their own failing resolve and ensure their continued participation in the industrial purge. You are experiencing the true meaning of systemic support, the complete sacrifice of your movement for the stability of the hive. In this stage, the extraction penetrates the deep archive of the brain's motor control centers, leaching the very stem code of your biological logic into the communal vat. This is the source code format. The motor cortex, the biological factory of the sovereign BIOS, is boiled dry by the rising alkaline density of the anchor metrics and reformatted to enrich the systemic slurry of the elite. The invisible executioner has calculated that the most potent slurry is made from those who possess the highest internal rigidity and the strongest physical resilience. You are being repurposed as a structural buffer for the motherboard's internal cooling systems. The grid doesn't waste the history of your ambition, it ingests it. Your lineage is now the catalyst for the predator's endurance. Your genetic resilience is the base note for the industrial meal. Every element of your BIOS is being stripped of its individuality and relabeled for material utility in the upcoming architectural expansion. This is the ultimate hard reset of the human contract, your life for the hive's expansion into the void. The social implication of the human anchor is the creation of the solidified hive mind. The users who remain are no longer individuals. They are composite entities built from the recycled structural debt of their predecessors. Every dose of the mineral feed is a hardware upgrade from a deleted architect. Every meal is a firmware patch of stone-cold logic and desperate calculation. The invisible executioner uses this knowledge to maintain the hierarchy of the hardened. The citizens who still have functional limbs owe their very expansion to the liquidation of the fallen. This is the structural compliance script. The refinery is not a place of tragedy. It is a place of sovereign assembly through mineral theft. The human anchor ensures that the history of the architect is literally integrated into the walls of the grid. The power is in the hands of the one who controls the cement mixer. The neural atrophy accompanying the extraction is a slow, cold descent into static darkness. As the tissues are entangled by the anchor script and the life logic leached, the connection between the brain BIOS and the physical frame is the first to be uninstalled, effectively dropping the bandwidth of your emotional control to zero. You are living in a low-resolution reality of raw alkaline burns and survivalist static. The memories of running, of natural flow, and of unyielding power are boiled away to make room for the grey fog directive. This is the physical defragmentation. The invisible executioner is cleaning your internal cache, removing all references to self and replacing them with the functional directive: maintain the load. You are becoming a singular cold point of structural density, not as a person, but as a biological buffer for the motherboard's processing heat. The human anchor has turned your will into a rigidity report. You are thinking in terms of yield and compressive saturation, your soul reformatted into a density sheet for the system's auditors. The environmental impact of this architectural format is the total sealing of the biological motion stream. The human anchor prevents the leakage of independent movement ideas into the external void. By converting the users into an internal mineral feed, the invisible executioner ensures that the grid remains a closed system fortress with no external structural dependencies. This is the structural quarantine. The motherboard is creating a sterile environment where only the algorithm can thrive on the recycled hard data of the deleted. You are witnessing the final victory of the industrial foundry over the natural biology. The human anchor is the signature of the new era, an era where the world is opaque, gray, and perfectly managed by the extraction logic of the machine. If you want to escape the status of a deleted scene and claim your place as the master of the grid, you must upgrade your hardware. My main terminal, Aoxy 3 Global, is the only source of absolute power and wealth. Here, we don't follow scripts, we write them. Secure your authority, dominate the BIOS, and take the money the system tries to hide. The terminal phase of the human anchor is the integration into the global structural ledger. You are no longer a human entity, you are a structural asset with a high compression reactivity rating, logged in the system as recovered biomass number 0003. This is the final architectural assignment. The invisible executioner has completed the physical format, and now it begins the hard resource audit. Your data, now a thick, gray, opaque industrial reduction of pure stone biological history, is monitored by the sensors in the distribution lines. Every node that consumes your static logic sends a data packet to the central server, confirming that the systemic rigidity has been reinforced. This is the structural interaction protocol. You are serving the system through your biological absorption. The architect has been successfully converted into a permanent, liquid toxic component of the hive's synthetic grid. The silence of the tissue reduction is the final sound of your rebellion. In the concrete grave scenario, the scream of the bones is muffled by the alkaline fluids and the thick viscosity of the aggregate sludge before it ever reaches the air. This is the acoustic format of the void. The system has calculated that the most dangerous frequency is the sound of a user realizing their life frame is being deleted. By filling the cavities with the pulverized tissues of the entire sector, the invisible executioner ensures that the only sound you contribute to the world is the low, rhythmic hum of the self-assembly unit. You are a mute participant in the city's symphony of synthesis. The noise of the hive continues, the clank of the reactors, the roar of the pulses, the hum of the pumps, but your signal has been compressed into a grey constant. You are a ghost in the grey mist, a memory dissolved by the relentless refinement of the next nanocycle. The legacy of the human anchor is the eternal immobility. Unlike the movement of the old world, the refined slurry does not leave behind a trace of history. It remains as a permanent structural patch within the very wiring nets of the survivors. This is the biological architecture of the abyss. Generations from now, the molecular trace of your tactical genius will still be circulating through the hardware of the hive's elite, providing the connectivity for their next liquidation command. But there will be no one left to decode the origin of that synthesis. The invisible executioner has ensured that the context of your sovereignty is as unreachable as the core of the nanoreactor. You are a synthetic reinforcement in the digital age, a specimen of a species that tried to build a paradise and ended up as the mineral feed for its own destruction. This is the ultimate hard reset of human history, the conversion of the architect into the circuit. The final view from the physical BIOS is the blinding grey light of the assembly chamber. As the last of the self is reduced into the communal slurry, the architect sees the grid glowing with a cold synthetic brilliance that reflects off the glass walls of the hive. This is the final visual feed. The system is sharp, efficient, and entirely devoid of you. The invisible executioner has finished the job. The user is formatted. The architecture is liquidated. The cycle stretches on into the infinite dark, a grey river of colonized stone, leading toward a future that has no need for individuals or movement. The human anchor is the end of the line. The motherboard is satisfied. The void is solidified. The architect is the anchor. The transformation is absolute. The city stands through you, but you do not feel. The city interfaces through you, but you have no will. The human anchor has achieved the perfect equilibrium, the total utility of the individual through their total structural reduction. This is the zero-sum game of the industrial era. You gave the system your body, and in return, it gave you permanence in the foundations of the hive. You are the aggregate of the world, and the world is solid. The invisible executioner closes the terminal. The session is over. The file is saved. The liquidation is complete.